Henry David Thoreau is credited with having said, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation and die with their song still inside them." Is that how you would like to live your life? A life of despair where you bury your potential, or would you like to live your life with creativity, meaning, and enthusiasm? It is as if we have this overbearing weight in our chest that communicates that something very important is just not right. This weight has the power to hobble us and prevent personal growth. I have observed patients describe this weight as intense boredom, the intense pain of loss or failure, the tension of irresolvable conflict, the anguish of inadequacy, the heavy darkness of aloneness, the despair of hopelessness, the restlessness of meaninglessness, and the angst of perpetual uncertainty. The source of this angst is what I label the existential burdens. These burdens are existential in that they are observed to be present in all humans. They are realities that are part of our essence. They are burdens in that they are a load we must carry, no matter how oppressive or worrisome. No one else can carry these burdens for you. Every moment of our lives is pregnant with the potential of an existential crisis. That moment when we become paralyzed by questions regarding our life. Does our life have any meaning, purpose, or value? We are at some level deep within our being aware of this potential and the impact it could have. We do our best to keep a lid on it through distractions, actions, denial, and superstitions. We live in an age ripe with the potential for an existential crisis, where that man of quiet desperation is not so quiet anymore. If we are to have any hope of living a full and meaningful life, we need to address the following existential issues: the burden of isolation, the burden of meaninglessness, the burden of free choice and responsibility, the burden of mortality, and the burden of spiritual emptiness. If we do not address these areas, we will be ensuring that we will be one of the people Thoreau describes as living a life of quiet desperation. Yes, we may have fleeting moments of elation, but are more likely to have seasons of despair as our distractions are discovered to be inadequate. These existential burdens are a powerful force. If left unaddressed, they can lead to despair, greed, bitterness, anger, depleted resilience, and lost potential. If, on the other hand, these areas are acknowledged, accepted, and addressed properly, they can be a source of unbelievable energy, creativity, and spiritual awakening. If we desire to be the vibrant, creative humans that God intended, then we need a plan for dealing with these deeply troubling issues. In the book of Psalms, chapter 6 and verse 3, we read the following: "I'm exhausted and worn out with my weeping. I endure weary, sleepless nights filled with moaning, soaking my pillow with my tears." Are you exhausted and worn out? Has your life turned out differently than you expected? Have you run out of answers? Do you feel isolated? Has life lost its meaning? Are you confused? The chances are that if you feel this way, you are spiritually empty. In this chapter, I will be dealing with the burden of spiritual emptiness. The first step in learning how to deal with this burden of spiritual emptiness is to acknowledge that it exists and that it is a problem. So what is spirituality? What is spiritual emptiness? Why is spirituality important? Spirituality is essentially restoration. Restoration of body, soul, and spirit. It is the path and process of reclaiming our relationship with God, learning to walk with Him and not in opposition to Him. It is the recovery of the image of God in man. It is the rebirth of our spirit with subsequent transformation in our body and soul. Spiritual emptiness is the pursuit of comfort and a sense of completeness apart from a relationship to God. It is man's attempt, under his own power, with his own purpose and plans, to negotiate his life path and in the process deal with the issues that are part of all of our lives without depending on God. We live in an age with lots of solutions to our problems that do not require reliance on God. So, why do spiritual things matter? We know about proper diet and exercise. We have beneficial models of psychology and philosophy. We have affluence and distractions that can keep us busy. We have never known so much about diet and exercise, yet we are more obese than ever. We have never had so much information on our psychology and emotions, yet the suicide and addiction rates are skyrocketing. We are rich in resources, yet poor in spirit. Something vital is still missing. We are all aware deep inside us that there is someone, a master designer, who is much bigger than ourselves, and we were made to serve that someone and not spend our life in endless self-service. We are rarely aware of our spiritual emptiness. It is apparent when we are up against something much bigger than ourselves, like the threat of a major loss or the struggle with an addiction. We are also aware of it during times of prosperity. Even if we have acquired everything we could want, we are still aware that something vital is missing. This awareness is often written off as a bout of fatigue or emotional exhaustion, when in reality we are trying to fill our spirit with a substance that could never satisfy. How do you know that you are spiritually empty? What are the signs and symptoms of spiritual emptiness? A spiritually empty life is a life of self-centeredness and self-promotion. All that matters is my experience, my life, my comfort, and my image. I may be aware of others, but not aware of their pain or their struggle. The life mission of the spiritually empty is to avoid discomfort and pursue comfort no matter what the cost. If you are spiritually empty, you are proud. You think your way is the only way. You may be nice and kind about it, but you are still arrogant. If you are spiritually empty, you are also deceptive. You deceive others and you deceive yourself. You work hard to hide your faults and point out the faults in others in an ever so nice way. If you are spiritually empty, you are not thankful or grateful. Your life is lived with constant discontent. You are never satisfied. These are several of the evidences of living a spiritually empty life, but the greatest evidence is that you are living a life of constant comparison. Hollow contentment or increased discontentment is found in comparison with peers, comparison with your expectations, or comparisons with your former youthful self. We constantly use comparison as a tool to determine our value. From the time we are first born, the comparison begins. We are weighed and measured and labeled based on our size. As life goes on, the comparisons continue. Just pause for a moment to consider the many tools of comparison you experience on a normal day. You have scales to weigh you, measuring tapes to size you, clothing sizes, IQ tests, school grades, credit scores, and of course the big one, a mirror. We compare ourselves to others and our former selves, and in the end, we are not satisfied. If you score high on the comparison scale today, the result is pressure to maintain that position or arrogance at your success. If you rate low on the scale, the result is discontentment. As you age, that person you see in the mirror every day becomes a fading vision of your once fit and fashionable self. Spiritual emptiness, the life of constant comparison, results in the life of quiet desperation, full of disappointment and discouragement. We end up wasting a lot of our life trying to fight or change what we cannot change. It is time to accept that as people we are all very self-centered. We grumble and we complain that no one understands us. We believe no one can experience our physical or emotional pain the way we can, so we end up on a lifelong personal mission to achieve comfort. When we are successful in achieving some degree of comfort, we become proud. When we fail, we become depressed and even more self-centered. To get what we feel we need, we become deceptive and in the process lose our authenticity. We are no longer thankful or grateful. We live discontented and dissatisfied in a sea of constant comparison. This is the living hell of spiritual emptiness, a life of quiet desperation where at best we experience momentary comfort amid meaningless, endless distractions. A life of continuous self-service and fading compassion. All we care about is our comfort. We are willing to bend the rules because we see our circumstances as being special. So society's rules don't need to apply to me. We live as bitter, lonely victims with no sense of meaning or purpose. Our thoughts and motives are awash with denial and irresponsibility. We are dependent on our environment to come through for us and lessen our discomfort. When our discomfort increases, we become more self-focused and more aware of our pitiful human predicament. Our life is spent wallowing in discontent. This is the burden of spiritual emptiness. We are all born with our backs turned to God, determined to go our own way, and in the process of seeking comfort, manage to create even more discomfort and pain. Once we have accepted this burden for what it is, and that it is present in every human, we can get to the point where it can be appreciated. Well, how can this burden be appreciated? If we recognized what the problem is, and that it is an issue for all humans, we can stop comparing ourselves to one another and get on with addressing the real problem, our spiritual emptiness. If we are aware that where we are turning to address and fill our emptiness will not work, then maybe we will have a chance to turn in a direction that will be productive. We do not have to remain spiritually empty. The problem, however, is that it takes humility, honesty, courage, and gratitude to turn our lives around and seek God. And of course, this takes a leap of faith. It takes faith to believe there is a loving Creator who has provided a way back to Him through the sacrifice of His Son. A sacrifice that meant He experienced all of the physical pain, social isolation, and psychological anguish that all humans have ever experienced. So, there is someone who knows exactly what we are experiencing. He experienced it on the cross. He bore the weight of it for you. He has provided the path back to God. This is a gift that we only have to accept. The burden of spiritual emptiness does not have to weaken you. It can make you stronger. How can this be possible? How can the burden of spiritual emptiness strengthen you? Once the burden has been lessened by seeing it for what it is, you are free to use this reality as a strength and not a burden. So what does spirituality mean? How do we become more spiritual? The answer is actually quite simple. In the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29, verses 13 and 14, we read the following. When you come looking for me, you'll find me. Yes, when you get serious about finding me and want it more than anything else, I'll make sure you won't be disappointed. This is from the Message Bible. This is the path to spirituality, the humble, courageous path of seeking God with your whole heart. As we take these steps, it is important not to be confused by what spirituality is not. There have been many practices and beliefs that have been promoted as being spiritual, as a means of gaining a relationship with God, that are just counterfeit spirituality. Spirituality does not involve comparing yourself to anyone else. Spirituality is comparing yourself to what God has in store for you and living by His Word. Much of what we have equated with spirituality is nothing more than man's program to feel good about himself. I have worked with a lot of criminal patients over the years. As a group, the majority of them attend church regularly. They attend church not for spiritual growth, but as a way of convincing themselves that they are good people, and that how they conduct their life is not so bad. Our churches are filled with self-deceivers. Are you one of those self-deceivers? Spirituality is not the maintaining of a list of laws and rules. Laws and rules and boundaries are helpful to avoid negative consequences, but the keeping of laws does not get you closer to God. A life focused on law-keeping will result in a lack of compassion and joy. Rule-keeping and law focus is another mode of comparison that we use to determine our value. If I keep more laws than you, then I am more spiritual than you. This is not spirituality. It is a force that drives people away from God and away from each other. Spirituality is not a specific group of practices like meditation, prayer, or worship. Prayer, meditation, and worship are important elements of our relationship with God, but are only weak psychological boosters outside of our relationship with God. Do not use these practices as a measure of your spirituality. Just because you pray longer than your spouse does not necessarily make you a more spiritual person than your spouse. Are you praying, meditating, and worshiping as a result of your relationship with God? Or are you praying, meditating, and worshiping trying to gain favor with God? Spirituality is not sacrifice. Our relationship with God should free us to be generous in our giving, but how much you give does not determine your level of spirituality. You should be free to give because of what God has given you, giving out of gratitude and thanksgiving, and not as a means of buying special favors from God. Spirituality is not a specific diet or dietary code. You are responsible for what you put into your body. A specific diet will not get you closer to God. On the other hand, gluttony, alcohol abuse, and drug abuse are evidence that you are spiritually empty. You are responsible for everything you eat, drink, smoke, or inject. Choosing to put anything into your body to alter your mood is evidence of spiritual emptiness. Spirituality is not a belief. As it states in the Bible, even the devil believes. It is more a matter of faith and seeking God than a specific belief. It is not just the belief, it is what you do with the belief. How has your belief changed your life? Spirituality is not belonging to a specific group or club. Membership or attendance at a specific church or religious group does not make you spiritual. Encouraging one another of similar faith can be very uplifting and healing. It can encourage a relationship with God, but it is not a relationship with God or a measure of your relationship with God. Spirituality is not knowledge, wisdom, or reason. Spirituality is trusting God and not trusting your ability to reason. It is often more difficult For those who are seen to possess knowledge, wisdom, or the ability to reason, do not rely on their abilities. Gaining knowledge and acquiring wisdom can help determine a path in life, a path with more positive results than negative consequences. But great mental abilities does not equate with spirituality. Knowledge can help you see the wonder of God's creation. Wisdom can help you find a path with fewer negative consequences. Reason can help you evaluate your life, and if mixed with honesty, can help you realize that your knowledge and wisdom are not enough to build a relationship with God. A high intelligence quotient does not equal a high spiritual quotient that is a product of humble faith. Spirituality is not doing something to gain God's approval. It is accepting what He has so graciously offered. Spirituality is not living with a pressure to perform, but living with thanksgiving for what we have been given. Try as hard as you like, it will not improve your walk with God. The effort and activities that you use to gain spirituality may act as diversions or a means to avoid painful areas in your life, but it will not bring you closer to God. Spirituality is not just crying out for deliverance or personal comfort. Most people live their lives with no desire to relate to God. They just carry on from day to day until some big disaster. Then they cry out to God to come through for them. God is gracious and at times will come through, but it is much better to develop this relationship before the going gets tough, at a time when the relationship may be able to guide you in a direction that could avoid some of those big disasters. Spirituality is not a partial surrender or calling out to God to rescue you in times of trouble. Spirituality is not surrender in part of your life with the hope of seeing improvement. It is a surrender in all areas of your life. In my work in addiction medicine, I meet a lot of people who use surrender as a means of trying to build a stronger inner resolve to fight a craving. This type of surrender is more of a psychological trick to fight off an urge, a fight that is often lost to the addiction. Surrender is all or none, and it can be terrifying. So, how would you rate your spirituality? Is spirituality important to you? Are you discontented? Are you spiritually empty? Are you working hard to achieve what is offered as a gift? Do you have any idea of what I'm talking about? Are you honest about your life? Are you humble? Are you grateful? Are you content? Where do you turn for answers to life's difficult questions? Do not forget the promise that if you seek Him, you will find Him. Seek Him with your whole heart. God will not disappoint. For more information, contact the website at fracturedresilience.com, and for updates on new videos and podcasts, subscribe to the Fractured Resilience YouTube page.